Bridging the Gap began approximately 15 years ago. It was an idea that was born out of another statewide committee, and it was taken to heart by certain members of the Suffolk County community in treatment and in the criminal justice system.
Well, with all the changes that are going on in the healthcare field and in the field of addictions in general, there was a real need to take care of the staff. And that's why we were so happy to be able to have a conference on Vicarious Trauma, which is really about how the staff deals with hearing the stories that the clients tell them and how they take care of themselves.
Well, if we don't recognize that we're all affected by trauma, we really can't help people recognize how they're affected. And that was the message I got. It's real important.
The question is asked, why trauma? Why are we working on trauma? Why are we focusing on trauma? Much of the literature today about criminality and also about addiction reflects back that early trauma in life and compounded trauma in life leads to maladaptive responses to how we live. Last year's conference was on trauma itself. This year, our conference is on vicarious trauma, and vicarious trauma meaning the trauma that is experienced by the workers being exposed to the trauma of the clients, and how their own history of trauma may participate in that to compound the stressors that are around that.
I'm here today because I work at Suffolk County Methadone, and 99.9% of my clients have very significant trauma histories, and as I care for them, I wanted to learn how to care for myself.
I got a lot of information regarding the trauma and how it affects individuals. I also learned a lot about how it affects myself and what I need to do to help release and get in touch with my own feelings and be able to help my clients.
One of our breakouts is Lillian Drago speaking about transference and countertransference.
The experience of working with a traumatized client can become traumatic in and of itself. It's as though the clinician is witnessing the trauma that the client has experienced just by being engaged in a counseling process with that client. As the client struggles and divulges details about their traumatic experience, a good clinician who's really empathic, and that's one of the characteristics that makes a clinician effective, is to be empathy and be able to see the world through the client's eyes. That very attribute actually makes the clinician more susceptible to the hazard of something we call secondary traumatization, which is that they can start to experience some of the symptoms that people have when they experience trauma firsthand themselves, the symptoms of PTSD.
Secondary trauma affects all of us, and that's why we need the self-care. And that's what some of us professionals, including myself, can forget from time to time. If you are dealing with, for instance, child abuse, and you're seeing client after client after client, you can't help but get affected by it. If you don't deal with it, you can become numb to it. If you become numb to it, then the question is, how are you going to help?
Alice E. Augustini is preeminent in looking at alternatives in healing processes. This can mean acupuncture, this can be meditation, this can be any sort other than traditional Western medicine.
So compassion fatigue, in my area of expertise, I work with domestic violence and abuse specifically, and trauma. So I have many people who've been sexually abused, there's domestic violence, partner abuse, and so I take this in all day long. I do work a lot of hours, that's why I'm taking this program. And so I listen to them, and there's a certain amount of stress you're feeling. You feel anger at the abusive person. You feel impatient sometimes that the person you're speaking with isn't grasping everything that you're saying in order to help them. And so you do get burned out, and you sometimes actually feel ill, from hearing this all the time. So with my area of expertise, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, it happens all the time.
Beth Moran is a registered nurse who is speaking on the central nervous system and how it functions. The more that we know theoretically about how the brain works and what parts are engaged in it, then we can come to greater understanding of why we function as we do.
As a nurse practitioner dealing with holistic medicine, I look at the whole person. And one of the things that I like to look at really is the mind-body connection, which is what I'm going to be speaking about today in my breakout session, because I really believe that the mind-body connection, which has been studied by Candace Pert at the NIH, is the basis of most illness. And it has to do with the adrenal glands, it has to do with stress, it has to do with hidden traumas that we hold in our body. And so what we're going to talk about in my workshop is the scientific research behind the mind-body connection, and then the different modalities that are available to heal people from trauma that they're lodging in their body.
Bonnie E. Owens speaks on a very contemporary subject about apps for our phones and our iPads, because there is so much resource material out there that helps us in our everyday manner quickly and efficiently accessing new information.
As a psychotherapist, I use a lot of apps on my iPhone and iPad to help people right in the session re-regulate their body. I use the working definition of trauma as when your biology is assaulted in such a way it can't re-regulate itself. So I like to mention and notice that there's no word of psychology in there, so it's a biological assault. So talk therapy alone is not the ideal way to treat trauma. So these apps include breathing, yoga, guided meditation, physical exercise, journaling. So these are things that clients learn in the session with me, and then they get to take it away. And what I love about it is I do a lot of work with first responders, and so they're not very verbal about being in therapy among their other people. So, they have the anonymity of the phone 24/7, and everybody's on their phone today. So, somebody could be on Facebook and my client might be doing a guided meditation, but nobody's going to notice.
Our hope for the attendees, which are both from the criminal justice system and from the addiction and mental health systems, are that they leave here more informed about trauma, more informed about vicarious trauma as to what it is, but also how it specifically impacts on their work, on their personal lives, and how they can take steps to address that impact and minimize it so that they live more comfortably and function more comfortably in their workplaces.